Now, there are other types of navigation, and I'm just going to real quickly go over these just so you can see them. There's the breadcrumb navigation. So basically what it'll do is it'll show you the page that you're currently on. This is really common in like blog style ones, or like a place where people make comments or posts like Reddit. They'll have this because there'll be multiple pages that go down the line. This is not going to be typically your main form of navigation, but it is nice because it does give the user a sense of where they are. But generally speaking, not super handy. I actually used to have this as an option. It was a secondary navigation for my site, but I just found it was more muddy than anything else and not particularly useful. There's also tags. You don't see this one very often, and my illustration of them is not very good here either. Typically, the tags will be groups of links, and some will be bigger and smaller, and it'll be kind of like spread out. It's sort of what's that called? That thing where they do the cloud. It's like a cloud chart where people type in answers to things, and like the most prominent answers are bigger and the other ones are smaller. That's kind of how this is done. So usually this is generated dynamically by like a CMS, using a dynamic coding language in a different. It's something we can't do by default inside of HTML and CSS thus far. But it is another form. I don't highly suggest this one. Again, this is just meant to be in addition to, so people can kind of find other random things. Search is super handy, actually. So I did have this on my website at one point. I think I removed it. I thought it just made it messier. But it is handy to have because a lot of times people are just going to search for things. So even when I go on my computer now, I don't really go through. I used to click on the icon, then go up to apps, then go to whatever. Now I just type in what I'm looking for, and I just click on it there. I do almost all my navigation through search. Some people do that on the web as well. So it could be useful. It's definitely good for sites that are information sites where there's just a whole list of items. So for example, the W3 schools, they have a really prominent search bar because if you're going there, you're usually trying to find something specifically. So it's really good for those. But you shouldn't use it for primary navigation because you're not able to direct the flow of where you want people to go. There's the drop downs. No, hang on. I thought that would. No, I guess this doesn't. I thought I had this drop down working. Basically, you click on it, and then there'll be a sub menu. So if you go up to my the top of my web page, right, I have each class, and then when you hover over it, there's a drop down that happens, which is really nice because it kind of gives you the power of a horizontal bar or the look and aesthetic of a horizontal bar, but also the power of a vertical bar. So that way you can have a whole lot of things in there. The only thing with drop downs is that it requires more or less JavaScript and some other technologies in order to make those work. So you can't really use those at the current moment. You could probably make it work with CSS because you could have on hover that it reveals, but then as soon as you moved off of it, it would disappear again. So I think you would have difficulty trying to make it work. I have had students do it using the transition, but I don't generally suggest using the this, at least initially. When we get to after this first project, you might want to do the drop down menus. They're definitely handy. And then typically, this is not even a good example of a footer. Footer is just the navigation you will see usually on the very bottom of a web page. A lot of times it's not even buttons like this. It'll just be like text that are just a bunch of hyperlinks that'll go to, a lot of times like legal things or like directories of people that work there, or the big thing now is your social media links, things like that. Again, it's not a primary navigation. It's usually, it's almost like where you would write who the author is of the page. Anything that refers to like the location and how to contact and that sort of thing, that's usually on the bottom. And it's just, if someone's trying to figure out, where to go, that's how they get a hold of somebody. So it's not particularly useful, and this is not a good example of it. But that's another one that you can see. And there's other ways of doing it too. I've seen some where I've seen ones where they have like floating objects and you have to click on them. And it's like one of my Harry Potter, like I'm trying to grab was a snitch or something. You know what I mean? Like it's just, for the most part, you just want to stick to the horizontal bar. The other ones are cool, but you're not going to find them. They're not going to be as easily legible to your user.